Hi, and welcome back to the third session. I'm Gianluca Fiorelli, and today our guest is one of, those guys that we always refer to without maybe not really knowing his face. I mean, you know his face if you are set in the UK, but let's say if you are in the US, if you're in Spain, you probably know the tool behind which this person is working and operating as a marketing manager, which is SEO testing. I'm really glad he accepted to be my guest here because he surely always share very interesting things. He is, as I was saying, the marketing manager of SEO testing, and he is also define himself as a digital marketing leader, SEO content growth, product marketing, etc., etc. And this person is Ryan Jones. Hi, how are you doing, Ryan?
I'm very well, thank you, Gianluca. Thank you very much for having me on. It's a pleasure.
Wonderful voice. I mean, very different from mine. It seems that you were born for participating to a podcast with this voice.
Well, thank you very much for the compliment. I appreciate that.
Okay. So let's start with the classic question I always ask to the SEO guest of a third session. How SEO is treating you lately?
For me personally, it's treated me very well. So in terms of there is lots of new things for me to be learning, obviously, with the AI that's coming into it now. There's plenty of new avenues for me to look at and for me to be testing. So I've always thought of SEO as an industry where we can never just rest on our laurels and things like that. But yeah, in terms of how it's treated me, I have absolutely no complaints.
That's great to hear. Yes, a lot of things we are learning. That's one of the main reasons why the third session had been proposed by me to advance our ranking, and advance our ranking was very happy to participate as the producer of the video podcast. And obviously, because even if AI was there somehow as a sort of game before 2024, last year totally exploded in the SEO world. And SEO testing is a classic tool that allows SEO to conduct, obviously, testing in terms of SEO. But how, before talking about the importance of testing, but I'm curious how the eruption of these new surfaces like ChatGPT, like Gemini, like Perplexity, reshaping the same concept of testing, because testing before was obviously very focused only on Google search and not even AI overview. So really Google search classic. So how the concept of testing, how what kind of nuances you started first as a tool maker to test. I think it's the correct word for starting to see, okay, let's test this, but for ChatGPT. Let's see if these kind of changes are going to improve our visibility or so on. How these kind of things are making your own concept of testing and also the tool evolve.
Yeah, so I mean, for us, we've kind of started with the same basic principles that we used when we first launched SEO testing as a tool. So we've got a sort of feature within our tool now that allows us to do exactly that. So we can make a change on our website and we can tell it we're okay, we're this time we're targeting ChatGPT, we're targeting Gemini, or we're targeting a combination of these LLMs, right? And we do that in the sense of rather than measuring these traditional like SEO metrics, clicks, impressions, average position, that kind of thing, what we're now doing is measuring sessions that come from these LLMs. So ChatGPT, Gemini, things like that. There are a couple of caveats to that in the sense of one, referral data from LLMs at the minute is spotty at best, in the sense of sometimes they won't even send us referral data. Sometimes it's just listed as referral traffic or direct traffic, and that's incredibly hard to measure. But we are finding that, especially for larger sites, we are finding that they are still sending enough referrals a day to make a difference in terms of, okay, we can change this on our site and we can see that the impact that has had, like anecdotally, we launched a content refresh not too long ago. And I think for the time period of the test that we had set up, we had, I think, 2 sessions from ChatGPT where that had picked it up in some conversation, and someone had then obviously clicked on this particular blog post link, and we had the session data through from that. And now for the same test period, we're at, I think, well over 16 clicks from ChatGPT. So it's small numbers, but it's, in my mind, relevant numbers still. We can say that, okay, the changes we made to this blog post have worked. We are seeing more, I guess, traffic from ChatGPT. In terms of overall visibility, I mean, we only work on sessions at the minute because it's so difficult to measure visibility in these LLMs. I mean, we see studies from Rand and SpockToro all the time about having to run the same prompt 114 times or something like that to get the same list in the same order and things like that. So I'm hoping that in the near future, especially with LLM starting to launch ad platforms and things like that, I'm hoping we get more accurate visibility tracking. But until we get that, it remains to be seen almost. We can do the best with what we've got at the minute.
Yes, this is something we all are hoping that LLMs. I mean, maybe a good proxy could be somehow using the new Bing webmaster data from Copilot. We know it's not really saying to use it as a proxy for all the LLM, but it somehow can give us an hint about the direction of the solution of a specific test, especially if we compare it with AI. Or because for the LLMs themselves, yes, probably they are going to present us some kind of analytics or some kind of LLMs search webmaster tool. But yes, considering that ChatGPT is pretending to 100,000 US dollars minimum to start advertising on ChatGPT at this moment, I don't know. I mean, everything seems to be that everything is becoming so much fine, between brackets, for big enterprise companies, but the small and to medium companies are substantially abandoned and left to themselves to invent and experiment and try by trial and error solution. Because if we want to have consistent data, sometimes can become very, very expensive for these kind of businesses. I have another question. Many times, people, and we are seeing in these days, in these weeks, where many, many websites are tanking from having had produced massive content with AI, for instance, in order to reach the biggest visibility possible. I think that maybe one of the most interesting tests is comparing not only the visibility testing for seeing, okay, I'm growing visibility in ChatGPT, for instance, but comparing with what big change means for classic visibility in Google. I think you agree with that sometimes this kind of decision really need even more seriously to be tested before implemented.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm always a proponent of validating stuff before just launching in full time and going, okay, let's set this as a strategy. I'd much rather spend the additional time and do a small scale test first to validate something, especially when we get into the realm of LLMs, especially for smaller business, because like you just said, we are kind of being left in the lurch almost, in the sense of there's not going to be many businesses that can afford outright this immediate $200,000 fee to start advertising in ChatGPT. So I am absolutely a proponent for small scale testing to see what works first. Our whole philosophy has been built for the past however many years of find what works and then double down on it until it doesn't work anymore, and then you can reevaluate from there. The downsides from that is you do then start to see, like you were going into before, about this sort of rank and tank method of just mass producing AI content, that working for a period of time, and then being hit with some sort of, whether it's an algorithmic penalty or a manual penalty or something like that, and seeing it that way. We've seen so many case studies on X and LinkedIn of things like that happening. But I am still very much a fan of find what works and double down, and you can use testing to do that. Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah, yes. And in fact, I think this is the biggest problem because being greedy is quite common, not only in the SEO world, but sometimes are the same businesses, stakeholders who are very greedy and wants to jump the shark and try everything without really thinking on the consequences. And let's go a little bit more in the really beginning and of testing and SEO in general. Usually, there is a classic definition. We were talking of this also with Will Canada last week. And for instance, in technical SEO, especially in technical SEO, many, many times, even if SEO are getting better aware about this mistake, is a classic audit the website, finding the mistakes, checking the resolution. But how would you explain to an SEO that sometimes a best practice maybe is not the best thing to follow for resolving a problem for the specific of your own website?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one because I think so many websites and marketers and SEOs at the minute follow best practices, but there are problems with that in the sense of how we base these best practices. Like what are they actually based on? They're often based on anecdotal evidence, okay, of this worked for this particular site, so we'll try it over here, and then wondering why we don't necessarily see the same results. They're based on studies that have like weak correlation or even just like plain outdated information. I mean, we see this on X and LinkedIn all the time, and that can lead then to wasted resources and misguided strategies. So I'm not necessarily a fan of just implementing best practices here, there, and everywhere. There are obviously caveats to that in the sense of following the absolute core basic SEO principles, making sure your site is technically optimized and making sure the content you produce is one, both high quality and also relevant to your particular audience. There's always best practices and things like that that are best practices for a reason. But in terms of seeing a case study and then using that to inform your entire strategy going forward, because it goes down to that old adage, like what worked for an e-commerce site probably won't work for a more informational based content site like a SaaS website or a small to medium business site that's sort of feature pages only and things like that. So it all just comes down to that problem with, or at least the problem that I have with best practices.
Me too. And obviously, this is something that people usually learn with experience. And now that I have some quite a few years of experience, I know that one of the many questions that I have to ask to a new client when starting with a new client is what is the technical stack, the technological stack of your website? Because depending also on the technological stack, I maybe can obviously recommend a best practice, but it's not applicable. So we have to find a roundabout for resolving the issue. And sometimes also being very honest in saying, okay, because obviously, especially if you work and collaborate with an in-house SEO team, you have to somehow prevent a debate. And you're probably suggesting something that is not best practice. So you have to justify it. So usually this could be a tip for all the people listening to me, to us, is always present what should be formally the best practice, and from there explain why cannot be implemented. So you have this or this other option in order to find the solution that can give you the same results than the best practice. So I think this is the thing. And eventually then, if they are not agreeing, you can say, okay, let's test it. Let's test this solution. Okay, let's say that hopefully the testing is positive, is giving you positive feedback. But let's say that the testing obviously not always give a positive result or positive feedback from for our hypothesis. So also from your experience, how do you sell the positive of a failed test to
Yeah.
especially to the stakeholders? not maybe to an SEO, another SEO, but people above that.
Yeah, it's a really important question because, at least from our anecdotal experience, 50% of the tests that we run, even just on our own website, fail in terms of they don't bring the result that we thought they were going to bring. So it is really important to have a conversation around that. And the way I frame it, especially to stakeholders who don't necessarily like speak SEO and things like that, the way I often frame it is, at the end of the day, we have spent this time and maybe in some cases a little bit of money running this test. We've not seen the results that we wanted. Obviously, that is always going to be disappointing. But at the same time, it saves you then going down a rabbit hole and down a path of a strategy that just wasn't going to work. So I frame it in the sense of, okay, this test has failed, but we've probably saved a lot of time, a lot of effort, and a lot of money in the future because we know that this didn't work. So we know that we don't necessarily need to spend the resources and go through and implement this site wide because we've ran this test before. So in my experience of validating that to stakeholders who are just interested in the bottom line, that's been the best way of framing it that I've come across.
Yeah, yeah, I think I totally agree with you. And obviously, classic with the stakeholders, don't talk about technicalities, talk about money. So if you are reframing, okay, we did this test, it failed, but it made us save tons of money. And especially not only money, because nothing was coming out and maybe implementing what we wanted to implement was costly, but maybe because it was even going to have a negative effect, especially if test was going to give us a negative results. And one other thing that, okay, because when someone is thinking of testing, and usually people are used to think in the classic conversion rate optimization test, A/B test. But what is very different, I think, in testing for SEO is that you're testing on an environment which is not your website substantially. You have another player, which is Google. I mean, we were shaming Google and blaming Google because it was changing so much, and not only didn't stop changing, updating itself, but even increased the rhythm of the changes that it presents every day. So, what kind of recommendation would you give to an SEO team or an SEO consultant, for instance, like me, to being able to isolate the noise of all these constant changes Google presents, for instance, in the same design of a SERP? Not talking about when maybe you start a test and the day after Google decides that it wants to roll out a spam update or a core update.
Yeah. So I'll bring the second point through first. So in terms of like what's happened when we run tests, in the sense of we've launched a test and then at some point a confirmed Google algorithm update has been launched, whether it's a spam update, core update, even the discover update that we've just seen, right? We know from past experience that it's probably better to pause that test, to maybe go back and try run it again, purely because you're not going to be able to say with any confidence that that test has been down to the change you've made. It could obviously be the change that Google's made to their algorithm and things like that. And then in terms of looking at SERP features and things like that, it's always good from my point of view to keep an eye on the SERP features. So let's say you're running a content refresh, for example. You might have seen a blog post that is ranking for like a target keyword. It's like position 8, not necessarily getting many clicks and things like that. Say, okay, well, we're going to do this and this and this. We'll update the content. We'll make it more readable. We'll run through. Pre-test, I would also make a point of noting down what SERP features are on the SERP already. So is there a people also ask box that could be taking some clicks? There's naturally, obviously, for most informational content, probably going to be an AI overview at this point as well. So keeping an eye on the SERP features is always best practice as well. And then the final one, and I've left this deliberately to the final point because it is the kind of most complex thing to maybe understand, is also aiming for statistical significance on most tests if you can. And by that, I just mean making sure you have enough of what you're measuring. So if you're measuring clicks or impressions and things like that, making sure you have enough of them just to give yourself more confidence to say that, okay, we've made this change. We can see that we've had in the pre-test period, we were averaging at, I don't know, 100 clicks per day. And now we can see that after the test, we're averaging now 150. But we've got enough clicks there, and we've got enough click data there to say with some certainty that this is a statistically significant result. And you can do all the maths for that yourself, or you can use a tool provider that does statistical calculations for you. So we do statistical calculations for all tests in terms of time-based tests. I know Search Pilot do the same. They give a confidence level for all of their tests as well. But you can also do it yourself. It just involves some complicated maths that I'm not smart enough to understand.
And me even less. Uh, I have a question, which is about, I don't know if you're doing it's a sort of test that I'm thinking about. Sometimes I do quite manually, mostly not really as a test, but I'm trying to find a correlation. We know that AI overview is sometimes present very classic blue links. And let's say there is a way to test if we are able to have a page linked with a blue link, or that we constantly see that is linked with a blue link inside AI overview, to correlate this presence with less traffic loss, less click loss, or is something possible to test? Or if you already tested this, what kind of data you have seen?
Yeah, so we've Google AI overviews have been the bane of my existence for since they launched, essentially. I've run countless numbers of tests to try and get featured in AI overviews in some way, whether that's with a blue contextual link in the actual AI overview result, or whether it's a source link at the side. And for the life of me, we've just not been able to figure out like a concrete pattern. So we can't then come back and say, okay, we know that doing these three things in a blog post, for example, get us featured in AI overviews. It seems to come down to obviously there's stuff with query fan out. So we're now going through and making sure that we cover different fanned queries and things like that. In terms of actually testing this kind of stuff out, it's certainly entirely possible to do. Maybe it's not possible with the tool sets that people are using in terms of purely because we connect with Google Search Console to get our data. And we know that as annoying as it is, Google just doesn't give us AI overview data. It's all lumped in with normal Search Console data. So we can't really be concrete there. But this is where we see the advantages of vibe coding, for instance. So using Claude Code or Replit or something like that. And one of the things I've been doing over the past few weeks is updating some of the informational content on our site. And then I've called it like an AI overview watcher, basically. But it basically uses the data for SEO API, runs through and scans the SERP for keywords. One, looks to see if there's an AI overview in place. And then two, it looks to see whether we're featured in that AI overview. So you can absolutely do it. It's just slightly more difficult and may require you to build like a little tool set out on your own until we actually get some form of more accurate tracking from Google and Bing and things like that to see when we're featured in these kind of AI overview things. It's going to be difficult, but it is almost certainly possible.
Yes, I was asking you about these things, mostly moved by, for instance, for a couple of clients of mine, whether I had enough volume of data, because AI overview is already there for a long time, a statistically interesting long time already. And for some kind of queries, you know that sometimes Google, as you were saying, presents the AI overview, sometimes not. And for this client, sometimes he was presenting that they were always presenting them as a source. This is the first important thing to notice. But sometimes not only as a source, but also, as I was saying, as a classic citation with a blue link inside the answer. So what I, with my own, let's say, manual testing, manual as correlating the data, I was saying, okay, I know that during this period it was present on AI overview, but also present in the classic search results. And it was substantially losing this kind of clicks with respect a year before, because when AI overview wasn't present and the website with that page for that keyword was ranking more or less in the same position in the classic search. And then comparing from when I was noticing that the blue link was present in the AI overview, and I was seeing that the CTR was, still losing clicks somehow, but very much less, and sometimes even growing, because AI overview, if a blue link is present, this is my assumption, if a classic link is present in the AI overview, people clicks on it almost surely, because it's natural, because it's in the conversation of the link. It's not something added. It's not something that you have to look in a list and decide, okay, I click on this search results or these other search results, maybe based on brand perception. But that is something interesting and can make us understand why Google is so testing these kind of things. And sometimes saying to us that no, it's not true, but AI overview is not sending traffic. It is sending traffic, but obviously without us being able to see data on search console, SEO are by nature skeptical. So
Yes.
give us the data to trust you. Let's move to another wonderful topic that I really like, because I'm really fond into everything clustering and topical apps and so on, which is the topical internal links, which is one of your big topics. So if I remember well, internal linking is one of your beloved topics. If I remember well, you did something with in collaboration with Screaming Frog, am I right?
Yes. Yes.
And and so you were talking about with data, substantially, how internal linking is important. It's true that it's a topic that resurged in the past couple of years, let's say. But still, what do you see people's, and SEO in particular, are misunderstanding or doing incorrectly when it comes to internal links?
I don't know whether there's a sort of incorrect thing that people are possibly doing in terms of internal links. I think the biggest mistake that you can possibly make when it comes to SEO, and this is no matter whether you're working on like an e-commerce site or a SaaS site or any other site in particular, I think the biggest mistake is not seeing the importance of internal links. Because, and this is again, this is anecdotal, so this is our own testing on our own site, but almost every single SEO test that we've ran that has involved adding internal links, whether this is to blog posts or feature pages or things like this, has led to an increase in clicks in an environment where 50% of tests succeed, 50% of tests fail in the sense that they either lose clicks or they don't give us meaningful data. Internal linking is one of those ones that, for the most part, we can say is a positive activity to be doing, in the sense that it brings us more traffic, it brings us more clicks, it brings us more revenue sometimes. And I think there's a few reasons for that. First off, obviously going right into the SEO basics, it establishes that page rank link equity that we all love. So it's the easiest quick win that we can have, whether we publish new content and we can say, okay, let's start to internally link this so we can give it a bit of value, is in a sense, from Google's standpoint, before we even get onto any link acquisition from outside sources. It helps us with, and this is where the resurgence, like you were saying, has come in the past 2-3 years, however long it's been. It helps us establish a more sort of topical authority as well. So if there's a certain topic that we love to write about, then we can really be sort of mindful about the internal links that we produce and create this kind of topical map that Google likes to see. And then just generally as well, like improving crawlability and user experience and giving users a good experience on your site. So if someone lands on our blog post, for instance, and we have like a caveat about another topic, it just makes sense for us to internally link there, even regardless or not of whether it's best practice or not. Because if a user is interested in that particular topic, they may well want to click through and read about that. And then that sends positive signals to Google, because it just shows that they're having a better experience on the site. So if they're landing on our blog post from the SERPs, they're clicking a few internal links, and then whether or not they leave the page or then they go to a next action that we want them to do, like start a free trial or get in touch with us and things like that, it just shows Google that they're having a good experience on the site. And we know from the work that like Mark Williams Cook has done and the Google leaks that we saw however long ago it was, we know that they place an importance on the experience that users are having. So just making sure that they have this good user experience. So regardless or not of whether it's go like best practice, if it makes sense to add an internal link somewhere to one of your other blog posts or the pages on your site, just do it. Take the time to do it because it's just, I don't want to use the term best practice because I went through and said that whole thing about how I don't necessarily agree with fully best practice, but it just drill down to that whole thing of if it makes sense for the user, then do it because it's going to give them a more positive user experience than they
Yes.
might have had before.
Instead of best practice, let's call it common sense.
Yes, let's call it common.
And
like
also
that.
the question is, if you were a user, would you click on these kind of links, internal links, or not? And talking about internal links, I mean, it's a very, 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 very old part, a patent. I'm not sure if it's even considered, but I think it's so embedded in the algorithm of Google that obviously it has still quite a big importance, which is reasonable server patent. So depending on where the internal link is placed, it has more value or lesser value.
Yes.
From your testing, you have seen this a reflection of the value of an internal link depending on if it's let's say, content, a contextual link or navigational link or a sidebar, somehow templated link. For instance, let's say, when we talk about products in e-commerce, and we have people who saw this product also saw this. So all the formula that in e-commerce we can invent in order to try to internal link better to related products. Did you see somehow a sort of ranking on the value of internal link?
I mean, I can't necessarily speak to that purely because I don't think we've really tested that in terms of actual like link placements. However, what we have seen, and this could well link through to the patent, it might not, but what we have seen is, and this goes back to what you were just saying about like the golden rules or common sense to follow, is when we've linked for obviously making sure the link makes sense and things like that, but when we've linked from, let's say, like top pages on a website, so pages that get lots of traffic, rank for lots of keywords, those types of internal link placements seem to, at least from our end, do better than the links that we've placed on maybe like lower authority blog posts that don't necessarily get a lot of clicks. And we have seen it as well where we've linked, like created new topic clusters. But this is where maybe I might disagree and say that the patent might not be at least as effective as it was. But we've seen just from our own anecdotal stuff where we've created new topic clusters and linked from the footer, we've seen a big increase in clicks. Now, whether that's down to it being placed on the footer or the fact that we've done all this work and created this great internally linked topic cluster and things like that, that's probably more realistic rather than just us placing it on the footer. But yeah, in terms of like actual tests that we've done to specifically look at this particular like placement of links, we haven't done much testing around that. Although it's a good idea. I might have to do it and then come up with a LinkedIn post about it.
Yeah, keep me informed. And talking about, yes, you already introduced this topic, which is also going a common word that is going to be repeated quite a lot now. The internal links obviously are the connectors, let's call it so, that are shaping a content tab, a topical content tab. So an app wouldn't be an app without internal linking. The classic structure is from the pillar to the subpillar and cluster contents, lateral between subpillars and cluster contents, but the way back from the clusters to the pillar, and obviously the lateral one. Where I see failing many topical apps is when people are not able to do the correct internal linking laterally, because maybe they are linking to content that is part of a topical app, but it's not strictly related to a specific sub niche. That, for instance, cluster content could be a landing page or could be a blog post is really about. You agree with me? This is maybe usually the classic mistake people do when creating topical apps architecture.
Yeah, I do absolutely agree with you on that. And also I think this goes into like what we're seeing at the minute with now what we can do with like the OpenAI API and things like that and getting into vector embeddings. I've not done too much work around this. We've done a little bit of work internally on this kind of stuff and we've seen positive results. So we know that like obviously internally linking where it makes sense for an algorithm can obviously have positive results. But just going back to what I said before, and this links through to the fact that no one in my experience, no one knows your site or your topic. Like if you're a true expert in a particular topic, no one knows that better than you. So if you're looking at your site and let's say reading through one of these like sub pieces, if you think an internal link to like laterally and linking that through to whether it's a landing page or another content piece or something like that. If you think it makes sense to do so, and you can see that from even if you do like a little bit of user testing on the site using something like I don't know, like Crazy Egg or something like that, if you think it makes sense to do that, the chances are the algorithm's going to agree with you in some sense, even if you're not going down into like the full, okay, let's have an internal link here because the vector embeddings say that we should. But it just goes down to common sense and common practice almost. If you think it makes sense to do it, it probably does. The downside of that is you can go a little bit too far in the other direction and say, okay, well, we've mentioned a keyword here, so we should link to that and link to that. And that's where people see messes with like different content hubs and topic hubs interlinking with each other and messing it up that way. So there is a limit to how far you can go, but I still go down to best practice and topic ownership in a sense of no, if no one knows the topic better than you, then it makes good sense to do that.
And another things I want to ask you related to topical apps. Usually, that's another mistake that I see and that I always talk against is considering topical apps only in the, let's say, in the constraints in the related to informational content. When I think, I don't know if you agree and if you've seen positive results, maybe doing the same things that I do, is the topical apps is not just about owning a topic in the informational side, but owning the search journey people want to eventually do about the topic. So from the very big blue informational content to the deeper, let's say if we are creating it, let's say topical labs about, I don't know, sneakers, runners. And you create a topical lab with all the informational content, how to choose the right sneakers, how to mm, let's say, how to make more comfortable of a sneaker after the first time you are wearing it and so on, going deeper to the specific category pages of a e-commerce, a product page and so on, or even having this kind of middle of a funnel content, which is a classic L pages about the product. So resolving issues of people that already had your sneaker or had other sneakers of another brand and wants to see if yours had the same problem. Do you think
Yeah.
this is the correct way to create a topical hub for conquering the so cited topical authority?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the way you've described it is in my way of looking at it, I think is quite possibly the best way to do it because we can like have a whole separate discussion about what's happening to the top of the funnel in sense of like LLMs and Google's AI overviews. I still think top of the funnel content matters. It might just matter in a different way. Like we might not necessarily see clicks from it directly. We can still see some clicks from it and we still see some clicks from our top of the funnel content. But we also need to make sure that we're the ones informing the discussion so that when LLMs go and do their grounding and things like that, then we can be informed in that top of the funnel search journey. But to not get sidetracked and go on a whole discussion about LLMs and the whole death of top of the funnel traffic thing. In terms of the actual journey, that is exactly where we want to be. We want to be known as the source that provides all the information that someone needs when they're just first looking at a topic. We want to make sure that we're the source of information that people see when they're researching different tools or different websites to look at, or like the sneaker example that you used, like the different brands that people could use and things like that. Yes, then we obviously want to be the place that where people go and make that purchase decision and choose to buy from us. And then yeah, exactly, and absolutely, it also helps to have sort of post purchase content and things like that, like help based content and things, because even if we remove the SEO aspect from it entirely, it just works from a business standpoint for us to be the source of information across all aspects of the spectrum, from initial information right through to post purchase, and making sure that people have a great experience with customer support if they need it. Because that at the end of the day is going to be what drives repeat business and things like that, and reduce churn if you're a software business or something like that. And that's where we get into like the whole business aspect of SEO. So even if you remove the SEO benefits of doing that from like the first port of call, it works from a business perspective as well.
Yes, I agree. I mean, if your purpose as an SEO is to become the source of truth, for instance, when we talk about LLMs, the source of truth that LLM trust, the classic effect of the EAT. So, I mean, you cannot be a source of truth if you are not showing expertise and experience also in the informational space of a topic. And secondly, I think that many people says this, neglecting informational content for one reason, because they chase the consensus, because they have this idea of a consensus. The problem is that the consensus, especially in LLMs, doesn't make you even be cited because it's consensus. It's already in the training data. So when something is already in the training data, LLMs don't mention anything. So maybe are stealing from you, but not mentioning you. And the same is actually if we think in classical research, we know that Google explicitly say that, okay, in relation to consensus and information, if you are not bringing something new or a different perspective about the consensus, even if you are talking about consensus, because for instance, in your money, your life, Google really penalize websites that are against the consensus. But if you don't try to point to this information gain value, obviously that the informational content is expensive to produce, time consuming, even if you are using AI, because you need so many human in the loops check to see if the content is valid or not. But obviously people will start saying, okay, it's not bringing traffic, it's not bringing impression, and the LLM is stealing things from us and without mentioning and so on. Don't do it. I think that is a big misunderstanding of the need of informational content. I have one last question, and then let's return to the SEO testing. For a tool called SEO testing, obviously that immediately we start thinking about the most important metric is, let's see how well we appear, for instance, in the search results pages. If, for instance, with some tests, we are appearing not only as a search snippet, but also in the search features and so on, how much traffic we are obtaining thanks to this test, etc., etc., etc. But shouldn't be eventually conversion and micro conversion the real metric to measure?
Yes, absolutely. We should. That should always be the number one thing you can look at. You can look at it from like a sort of a downstairs point of view, in a sense of like, you know, that if you have like a landing page that converts really well, you can often say that if you can increase traffic to that landing page, then you will eventually see more revenue downstream from that. But I do think it needs to be in the point of discussion from the very first start, because if we had a test, for instance, that we ran on our sign up page, for instance, and we saw a massive increase in clicks, but we also saw form fills like drop off a cliff. I don't think in good conscience that we can say that that was a successful SEO test because, yeah, at the end of the day, okay, we got more traffic from it. Like conversions tanked, right? So we can't necessarily say that's a successful thing. And then in the same vein, we've seen examples of SEO tests where SEO metrics have gone down slightly. We've ranked maybe for less queries, we've seen less clicks, but we've changed the narrative almost and we've started ranking for more relevant queries for that buying decision being made. And we've seen like an increase in revenue from it. So from that standpoint, you could look at it from a purely SEO metric and say that, okay, well, we didn't see a click increase from this, so it's a negative test. So it's like, hold on, but we did see more people actually buy products or sign up to a trial or something. So from my experience, I can call that a successful test because at the end of the day, it made the business more money. So I do think we need to keep that in the narrative and say, okay, well, here are the tests that we've run. Here are the SEO results we've seen, but also here are the revenue results seen. And then from there, going back to what we talked about at the start, we can use that to inform strategy going forward because we know that these activities that we've done over the past month or past quarter or whatever, we know that these ones at the very top, these ones are the ones that bring us the most revenue. So let's double down on that because that's what brings us the most revenue. And that's going to be the most important for us. Like we're all like us as marketers at the end of the day, the vast, vast majority of us are results driven. And the results that we should be driving are business outcomes and revenue, profit, things like that. So that's where I stand on it. I think we need to focus on revenue based reporting, revenue focused reporting, and things like that. And also changing the narrative of talking about tests being fails or wins, but looking at it from a revenue point of view.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree, totally agree. And this is also a way to win your client at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
And so let's stop talking about testing, SEO, LLMs. Let's talk a little more about you. I see many books behind you. Let's see. Yeah, I think that usually books really explain better a person than other things. What kind of books have you behind you?
Oh, there is a range of them. So there's a couple of SEO marketing type books in there. I've got the just recently released SEO in 2026 that I happen to be featured in, and I'm incredibly proud to have been featured in. There's also books on the pyramid principle, which helps with my public speaking, so explaining complex topics to individuals who might not be as experienced all the way through to sort of there's some sales books in there because sales helps marketing and things like that. There's some autobiographies in there. And if anyone is listening UK based, I'm a big Derby County fan. So there is a couple of Derby County books in there as well. I'm a huge football fan.
Ah, okay, 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 okay. So for,
So there's a big range of the books that I read.
yeah, but that's interesting because I mean, I'm always suspicious of people who just read, for instance, marketing books. I mean, you do marketing all the day. Why are you also reading, spending your free time reading marketing books? Okay, I understand that you have to learn, and you have to something like this, but sometimes reading something totally different, like I don't know, an historical novel, a sci-fi novel, a cooking book, can be a way to free your mind and then absorbing the work things differently. Another question about you. And what do you do when you are not testing?
So there's a range of things I do outside of work. So like I say, I'm a big sports fan, but this doesn't just cover football or if you're listening from the US, soccer. That would be my like number one sport that I love. I play that 2 to 3 times a week with friends. I'm involved in a charity football
In
team that
what
rate
in what position do you play?
centre back. So
Oh,
I'm at the heart of the defence. Helps because I'm tall. So for corner kicks and things like that, I'm one of the key defenders. But yeah, I play in a charity football team. So we raise money for different great causes, play other charity teams. But yeah, I love going to different sports events, ice hockey, American football I've been to when they travel over to Tottenham Stadium in London. And then yeah, just the general stuff really. So my partner lives in Oxfordshire a lot of the time, so traveling down to Oxfordshire and long walks in the countryside with the dog and things like that.
cool, cool. Well, thank you, Ryan. It was a real pleasure having you. I think that you share very, very interesting stuff with our audience of a session. And I hope to see you soon in real life and
Absolutely.
eventually in the future again here at the research session.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for having me on. I hope to see you in person again soon. And yeah, absolutely happy to come back on anytime.
And thanks to all of you for being so patient and stay up until the very end of the episode. And remember, if you are not subscribed, remember to subscribe and ring on the bell to be notified about new episode of the Search Session. Thank you and bye-bye.